The snow fell softly, covering the forest in a quiet, white blanket. The air was cold, and the only sound was the crunch of snow underfoot. In the middle of this frozen wilderness stood a small, cozy cabin. Inside, Evelyn sat by the fireplace, sipping hot tea. She had come here to escape the noise of the world, to find peace in the silence of nature. But peace, she would soon discover, can be broken in the most unexpected ways. A storm rolled in suddenly, howling through the trees and shaking the cabin's windows. Evelyn looked outside and froze. There, in the snow, was a massive grizzly bear and her 3 tiny cubs. They were struggling to walk, their fur covered in ice. The mother bear's eyes were filled with desperation as she led her cubs toward the cabin. Evelyn's heart raced. Why were they here? And why were they coming to her? The mother bear stopped at the door, her large body blocking the wind. She let out a low, pleading growl, as if asking for help. Evelyn stood still, her mind racing. She knew how dangerous wild animals could be, especially a grizzly bear protecting her cubs. But she also couldn't ignore the pain in the bear's eyes. This wasn't just a wild animal. It was a mother fighting to keep her babies alive. Imagine this, a wild bear and her cubs show up at your door, cold and hungry. Do you help them, even if it puts you in danger, or do you close the door and let nature decide their fate? This is the heart-wrenching choice Evelyn had to make. Her decision would test her courage, her compassion, and her connection to the wild. This is a story of survival, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bond between a woman and nature. The storm raged outside, but Evelyn's attention was fixed on the scene unfolding on her porch. The mother bear, her fur glistening with snowflakes, stood protectively over her 3 cubs. Their tiny bodies shivered, and their eyes looked tired and hungry. Evelyn's heart ached. She knew she couldn't just stand there and do nothing. But what could she do? She was just one woman, alone in the wilderness, facing a wild animal that could easily turn dangerous. Cautiously, Evelyn moved to her kitchen. She grabbed a few pieces of bread, some apples, and a bowl of water. Her hands trembled as she opened the door just a crack, placing the food and water on the porch. The mother bear's ears perked up, and she sniffed the air. Evelyn quickly stepped back, closing the door and watching through the window. The bear hesitated, then slowly approached the food. She nudged the cubs forward, and they began to eat hungrily. Evelyn let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the forest covered in a thick layer of snow. Evelyn stepped outside, her boots crunching in the snow. She half expected the bears to be gone, but they were still there, curled up near the porch. The mother bear looked up at her, her eyes no longer filled with desperation, but with something softer curiosity perhaps. Evelyn felt a strange sense of relief. She went back inside and prepared more food, leaving it in the same spot as before. Days turned into weeks, and the bears became a regular presence at Evelyn's cabin. Every morning, she would leave food and water on the porch, and every morning, the mother bear and her cubs would come to eat. Over time, Evelyn noticed a change in the mother bear's behavior. She no longer growled or seemed wary of Evelyn's presence. Instead, she would sit quietly, watching Evelyn with calm, trusting eyes. The cubs, too, grew bolder, playfully tumbling around in the snow, while their mother kept a watchful eye. One day, Evelyn decided to sit on the porch while the bears ate. Her heart pounded as she slowly opened the door and stepped outside. The mother bear looked up but didn't move. Evelyn sat down, keeping a safe distance, and simply watched. The cubs, curious as ever, wandered closer to her, sniffing the air. Evelyn held her breath, afraid to make any sudden movements. But the mother bear didn't seem alarmed. She simply watched, her gaze steady and calm. It was in that moment that Evelyn realized something extraordinary. The mother bear no longer saw her as a threat. She had become a part of their world, just as they had become a part of hers. She wasn't just a visitor in Evelyn's world anymore, Evelyn thought to herself. She was a part of it. As the days went by, the bond between Evelyn and the bears grew stronger. She began to learn their routines when they would arrive, how they played, and even the little quirks that made each cub unique. One cub was particularly adventurous, always wandering off to explore, while another was shy and stayed close to its mother. The third cub was the smallest, often lagging behind but always determined to keep up. Evelyn found herself looking forward to their visits. She would sit on the porch, a cup of tea in hand, and watch as the cubs played in the snow. The mother bear would often sit nearby, her presence a comforting reminder of the trust they had built. It was a strange and beautiful relationship, one that defied the boundaries between human and wild. But Evelyn knew this couldn't last forever. The bears were wild animals, and they belonged in the forest, not on her porch. As spring approached, the snow began to melt, and the forest came alive with new growth. The mother bear started spending more time away from the cabin, leading her cubs deeper into the woods. Evelyn felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of pride. She had helped them survive the winter, and now it was time for them to return to their natural habitat. One morning, Evelyn stepped outside to find the porch empty. No food had been touched, and there were no paw prints in the snow. She stood there for a long time, staring into the forest. The bears were gone, but their presence lingered in her heart. She had made an impossible choice, and it had changed her life in ways she could never have imagined. This was more than just a story of survival. It was a story of connection, of trust, and of the unbreakable bond between a woman and the wild. As the days grew warmer, Evelyn noticed a change in the mother bear. She moved more slowly, her once powerful frame now thin and frail. The cubs, too, seemed weaker, their playful energy replaced by a quiet exhaustion. Evelyn's heart sank as she watched them struggle. She had done everything she could to help, leaving food, ensuring they had water, even sitting with them for hours to offer a sense of safety. But it wasn't enough. The mother bear was no longer able to hunt, and the cubs were too young to fend for themselves. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Evelyn sat on the porch, her mind racing. She couldn't bear to watch them suffer, but she also knew she couldn't keep them alive on her own. She needed help. Reluctantly, she reached for her phone and dialed the number of David, a wildlife expert she had met years ago during a hiking trip. When he answered, Evelyn's voice trembled as she explained the situation. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "I've been feeding them, but it's not enough. The mother is weak, and the cubs, they're just babies. I can't let them die, but I can't save them on my own." David listened quietly, then assured her he would come as soon as possible. "You've done the right thing by calling," he said. "We'll figure this out together." 2 days later, David arrived at the cabin with a team of wildlife specialists. They brought tranquilizers, medical supplies, and a large transport crate. Evelyn felt a knot tighten in her stomach as she watched them prepare. She knew this was the only way to save the bears, but the thought of separating them from their home and from her filled her with guilt. The mother bear and her cubs were resting near the edge of the forest when David and his team approached. Evelyn stayed back, her hands clenched into fists. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. She owed it to them to witness this moment, no matter how painful it was. David aimed the tranquilizer dart carefully, and with a soft whip, it struck the mother bear's shoulder. She let out a low growl, her eyes locking with Evelyn's for a brief moment before she slowly slumped to the ground. The cubs whimpered, nuzzling their mother's still body. Evelyn's chest tightened as she fought back tears. She wanted to run to them, to tell them everything would be okay, but she knew she couldn't. The team worked quickly, gently placing the mother bear on a stretcher and securing the cubs in a padded crate. Evelyn stood frozen, her heart breaking as she watched the family being loaded into the truck. David walked over to her, his expression kind but firm. "You did the right thing," he said. "They wouldn't have survived much longer out here. At the rehabilitation center, they'll get the care they need." The mother will regain her strength, and the cubs will learn to thrive. This isn't the end for them. It's a new beginning. Evelyn nodded, but his words did little to ease the ache in her chest. As the truck drove away, she felt a profound sense of loss. The cabin, once filled with the sounds of the bear's presence, now felt eerily quiet. She wandered back to the porch and sat down, staring at the empty spot where the bears had once gathered. Did I betray them, or did I save them? She whispered to herself. The question lingered in her mind, unanswered. She had done what she thought was best, but the weight of her decision felt heavy on her shoulders. Watching them leave was like losing a part of herself, a part she hadn't even realized she had given away. Over the next few days, Evelyn tried to return to her normal routine, but everything felt different. The forest, once a place of peace, now felt empty without the bears. She found herself glancing at the porch every morning, half expecting to see the mother bear and her cubs waiting for her. But they were gone, and all that remained were memories. David called a week later with an update. The mother bear was responding well to treatment, and the cubs were thriving under the care of the rehabilitation team. They're going to be okay, he assured her. And when they're ready, we'll release them back into the wild. You gave them a second chance, Evelyn. That's something to be proud of. Evelyn thanked him, but even his words couldn't fully ease her guilt. She had saved them, yes, but at what cost? The bond she had formed with the bears was unlike anything she had ever experienced, and letting them go had left a void in her heart. As she sat by the fire that evening, Evelyn realized something important. The bears had taught her about trust, about courage, and about the power of connection. They had shown her that even in the wildest of moments, there is beauty and meaning. And while their time together had been brief, it had changed her forever. This wasn't just a story about saving bears. It was a story about love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable ties that bind us to the natural world. Days turned into weeks, and the cabin felt emptier than ever. Evelyn tried to return to her normal routine, but something was missing. The porch, where the bears used to gather, felt too quiet. The forest, once alive with their presence, now seemed still and lifeless. Every morning, Evelyn would glance outside, half expecting to see the mother bear and her cubs waiting for her. But they were gone, and all that remained were memories. David called one day with an update. The mother bear is healing, he said. She's eating well and getting stronger every day. And the cubs, they're growing fast. They're playful and healthy, just like they should be. Evelyn smiled, but her heart still felt heavy. She was glad they were safe, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had lost something precious. As the weeks went by, Evelyn tried to focus on the positive. She reminded herself that she had done the right thing. The bears were alive because of her. But the quiet moments were the hardest. Sitting by the fire, sipping her tea, she would think about the mother bear's trusting eyes and the cubs' playful antics. She wondered if they missed her too. One night, as Evelyn was getting ready for bed, she heard a sound that made her freeze. It was a distant, mournful cry, a bear's cry. Her heart raced as she rushed to the window. The forest was dark, but the sound was unmistakable. It was the mother bear. Evelyn stood there, her breath fogging up the glass, listening to the cry echo through the trees. Was it a goodbye or a promise? She wondered. The sound faded, leaving only silence. Evelyn stayed by the window for a long time, her mind filled with questions. Did the mother bear remember her? Was she calling out to say thank you, or was she simply letting Evelyn know she was still out there? The next morning, Evelyn woke up feeling different. The emptiness in her heart was still there, but it was softer now. She realized that the bears had given her something priceless, a connection to the wild that she would never forget. They had shown her that even in the hardest moments, there is beauty and meaning. Evelyn stepped outside and took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. The forest felt alive again, as if the mother bear's cry had awakened something inside her. She knew she might never see the bears again, but that was okay. They were where they belonged, and so was she. As she walked back to the cabin, Evelyn felt a sense of peace. The bears had come into her life for a reason, and now they were a part of her story. She would always remember them, the mother bear's strength, the cubs' playful energy, and the bond they had shared. It was a bond that could never be broken, no matter how far apart they were. This wasn't just a story about saving bears. It was a story about love, courage, and the unbreakable ties that connect us to the natural world. And for Evelyn, it was a story she would carry in her heart forever. Months passed, and the seasons changed. Winter's icy grip gave way to the gentle warmth of spring. The forest came alive with the sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the breeze. But for Evelyn, life felt incomplete. The memory of the bears lingered in her heart, a constant reminder of the bond they had shared. She often found herself staring at the edge of the forest, wondering if they were out there, thriving in the wild. One afternoon, David arrived at the cabin with a small laptop in hand. "I have something to show you," he said with a smile. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat as she sat down beside him. David opened the laptop and played a video. The screen came to life with footage of the mother bear and her cubs. They were in a large, open enclosure at the rehabilitation center, surrounded by trees and grass. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears as she watched. The mother bear looked strong and healthy, her fur glossy and her movements confident. The cubs, now much bigger, tumbled and played with each other, their energy boundless. One of them even climbed a small tree, just like the adventurous cub she remembered. Evelyn laughed through her tears, her heart swelling with pride. "They're ready," David said gently. "We're going to release them back into the wild tomorrow." Evelyn nodded, but her chest tightened. She was happy for them, of course, but the thought of saying goodbye again felt overwhelming. David noticed her hesitation and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You gave them a second chance, Evelyn. This is what you wanted for them, isn't it?" "Yes," she whispered. "It's just hard to let go." The next morning, Evelyn joined David and his team at the release site deep in the forest. The air was crisp, and the sun filtered through the trees, casting golden light on the ground. The team carefully unloaded the transport crate and opened the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the mother bear stepped out, her nose twitching as she sniffed the air. The cubs followed, their eyes wide with curiosity. Evelyn stood at a distance, her heart pounding. The mother bear turned her head and looked directly at Evelyn. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, it felt like time stood still. Evelyn wanted to say something, to tell them how much they meant to her, but words felt unnecessary. The mother bear let out a soft grunt, as if to say, "Thank you." Then, with a flick of her tail, she led her cubs into the forest. Evelyn watched until they disappeared among the trees, her vision blurred by tears. It was a bittersweet moment, a mix of joy and sadness. She had saved them, but now they were gone, back to the wild where they belonged. As she turned to leave, David gave her a reassuring smile. "You did an amazing thing, Evelyn. They'll be okay." Weeks turned into months, and life at the cabin returned to its quiet rhythm. Evelyn tried to move on, but the memory of the bears stayed with her. She often found herself listening for their sounds, hoping to catch a glimpse of them in the forest. But the woods remained silent, and Evelyn wondered if she would ever see them again. Then, one spring morning, everything changed. Evelyn was sitting on the porch, sipping her tea, when she heard a familiar sound, a low, rumbling growl. Her heart leapt as she turned toward the edge of the forest. There, standing among the trees, was the mother bear. Her cubs, now almost fully grown, stood beside her. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. They had returned. The mother bear took a few steps forward, her eyes locked on Evelyn. The cubs followed, their movements cautious but curious. Evelyn stayed perfectly still, afraid to break the moment. The mother bear stopped a short distance away, her gaze steady and calm. It was as if she was saying, "We're here. We're okay." Tears streamed down Evelyn's face as she realized what this meant. The bears hadn't forgotten her. They had come back, not because they needed her, but because they wanted to. It was a silent acknowledgement, a connection that went beyond words. Evelyn felt a wave of gratitude and love wash over her. The mother bear let out a soft grunt, then turned and led her cubs back into the forest. Evelyn watched until they disappeared, her heart full. She knew this might be the last time she saw them, but it didn't matter. They were free and they were thriving. That was all she had ever wanted. As she sat back down on the porch, Evelyn felt a deep sense of peace. The bears had come into her life when she needed them most, and they had given her something she could never repay, a reminder of the beauty and resilience of life. She had saved them, but in many ways, they had saved her too. This was more than just a story about bears. It was a story about hope, about second chances, and about the unbreakable bond between humans and the wild. And for Evelyn, it was a story she would carry in her heart forever. Evelyn had always believed in the quiet life. Her cabin in the wilderness had been her escape, her sanctuary. But now, she understood. Something she hadn't before. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. Sitting at her wooden desk, she opened her journal, the same one she had written in for years, filling its pages with her thoughts, fears, and moments of solitude. But this time, she wasn't writing for herself. She was writing for them. She started with the first moment she had seen the mother bear, desperate and starving on her porch, the tiny cubs huddled behind her. She wrote about the slow trust that had formed, the silent bond between them. She described the difficult choice she had to make, the pain of letting them go, and the unexpected joy of knowing they had survived. Evelyn poured everything onto the pages, the lessons she had learned, the emotions she had carried, and the deep understanding she had gained about nature and her place within it. She never expected anyone to read it, but one day, on a whim, she shared a piece of it online. And then, something incredible happened. Her words spread faster than she could have imagined. Readers from all over reached out, moved by the story of a woman and a bear. Family who had changed each other's lives. Conservation groups picked up the story, using it to raise awareness about wildlife protection. Donations began pouring into wildlife rehabilitation centers, helping animals just like the bear family she had loved. Evelyn had never sought attention, but now she realized her experience had meaning beyond herself. It wasn't just about her and the bears, it was about the relationship between humans and nature, about kindness, about choices that mattered. One evening, as she sorted through the dozens of emails flooding her inbox, a familiar name popped up. David. She opened the message, her heartbeat quickening. Evelyn, you won't believe this. The smallest cub there, one you cared for the most, is thriving in the reserve. I thought you'd want to know. Tears welled up in her eyes as she read those words over and over. The smallest cub, the one that had looked back at her before disappearing into the trees. David had attached a picture. She opened it with trembling hands. There he was, strong, grown, and healthy, standing in the sunlight of the reserve. His fur was thick, his eyes bright and full of life. He looked like he belonged, like he was truly free. And then David's message continued. Would you like to see them one last time? The drive to the reserve was long, but Evelyn hardly noticed. Her heart pounded as she stepped out of the car, the scent of pine and fresh earth filling the air. David met her at the entrance, a warm smile on his face. They're just beyond that ridge, he said, leading the way. Evelyn followed in silence, her breath quickening with each step. Then, as they reached the clearing, she saw them. The mother bear stood tall, her massive frame unmistakable. The cubs no longer cubs, but strong young bears roam nearby. And then, the smallest one turned. He looked right at her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Evelyn didn't speak, didn't call out. She just stood there, letting the moment settle deep into her heart. She had once feared that they would forget her. But now, looking into the young bear's eyes, she knew. He hadn't forgotten, but he was where he was meant to be. Evelyn exhaled, a small smile forming on her lips. "They are free," she whispered, feeling the truth of the words settle inside her. "And that is enough." As the bears turned and disappeared into the wilderness once more, Evelyn stood watching, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. This was not an ending. This was a beginning. The years had softened the ache in Evelyn's heart, but the memory of the bears never faded. She often sat on her porch, staring at the edge of the forest, wondering if they were still out there. The cabin, once a place she had come to escape the world, had become a symbol of something far greater, a reminder that even in solitude, life finds ways to surprise us. Evelyn hadn't just survived the wilderness, she had discovered her purpose in it. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves danced in the wind, Evelyn heard a sound she thought she'd never hear again, a deep, rumbling growl. Her hands trembled as she stepped outside. There, at the tree line, stood the mother bear, her fur glowing in the sunlight. Beside her were 3 strong, fully grown cubs, their eyes bright and curious. Time had transformed them, but Evelyn would recognize them anywhere. The mother bear locked eyes with Evelyn, her gaze steady and wise. No words were needed. It was a quiet farewell, a final acknowledgement of the bond they had shared. Evelyn smiled through her tears, her heart swelling with pride. The cubs she had once seen shivering in the snow were now powerful, independent creatures, ready to face the wild on their own terms. As the bears turned to leave, Evelyn whispered, "I will always protect you." It wasn't just a promise to them, it was a vow to the forest, to the wild, and to herself. She had learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Compassion isn't weakness, but the strength to care for those who cannot ask for help. The bears disappeared into the trees, leaving Evelyn alone once more. But she no longer felt lonely. Their story had become a part of her, a testament to the unspoken language of trust between humans and nature. She had saved them, but they had given her something irreplaceable, a reason to believe in second chances. If this story touched your heart, remember, compassion and courage can bridge the gap between humans and nature. Every creature deserves a chance to thrive. Share this video to spread awareness and consider supporting wildlife conservation efforts in your area. Together, we can protect the wild places and the wild hearts that make our world extraordinary. Like, share, and let's make a difference.